Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Neighbors were consistently loud, so I got a bit louder at the wrong time of the year. Throughout the year I had noisy and thoughtless neighbors. They would often have loud parties that would go to the early hours of the morning. They were all in university, and of Indian descent. This becomes important later on. I had called the police, called the apartment manager, nobody would do anything about it. I was losing sleep, and my work was becoming affected as well. I had spoken to them directly, and they completely disregarded me, and refused to just shut the duck up. This went on for months, and I was writing out my lease to move somewhere else. One day I'm sitting watching TV on a nice spring day, and I have my windows wide open, and I hear one of the neighbor's friends come over, and he asks if he's coming out, and he says no, he needs to study for an important test he's taking the next day. This little snippet of information was all I needed. His friend leaves and he closes the door. I then proceeded to take my speakers and put them up against the walls. Near where I knew his desk was, there were balconies outside, so I often saw him studying here, and I began to blare Merzbow and death metal straight at the wall. I put on my noise-cancelling headphones and just blasted it as loud as possible for hours. My landlord actually ended up coming into the apartment, because I didn't hear him knocking, and he's obviously flipping out, but I'm like, Mayor, you never did crap when I complained, so good luck. Call the cops. My lease was set to be up soon anyway, and I was leaving the state, so duck ya. So landlord leaves, and I'm still amped up on adrenaline, and it's quiet for maybe 20 minutes, and I just intermittently start blasting music. The neighbor comes over irate, screaming that he has this big test, and he's got to pass it, apparently a medical student, and I just laughed in his face and said, I don't hear anything. He then makes a fantastic mistake, which was telling me he didn't just have a final tomorrow, but it was finals week. Oh great! Added stress for the week equals the fact that I continue doing this every night for the rest of the week. I set my alarm to go off every 30 minutes, and I would bang on the walls with a hammer, and blast music, and I was going a bit crazy as well, but that didn't matter, because I was ducking up this guy's life. Around day 3 of no sleep for anyone, he comes over screaming about how in India his family will disown him and all this nonsense, which just made me laugh, and just said the same thing over and over, that I didn't hear the music, and I think it was coming from somewhere else. I basically just started gaslighting him, acting really nice when he came over in a rage. That weekend the landlord gave some BS notice that I had to leave, which I was fine with, because he broke my lease and I wanted to get out anyway, so I got my deposit back. On the last morning I was there, I was moving out, and I knocked on the dickhead neighbor's door at like 8 AM and asked him if he wanted this old air conditioner I was going to throw out otherwise. He was totally in a daze, and I don't know if he really understood what was happening any longer. Anyway, hopefully I ducked up his life and his future a bit. Should have shut the duck up when I told him numerous times. Next one is titled, A Snowplow Contractor for Our City Gets Shut Down from Ice-Cold Revenge. I used to live right off of a main road in a city we will call Dimsdale. Dimsdale was a decent size as it has a population of around 30,000 people. Due to a winter storm, the roads through the entirety of Dimsdale were covered in 1.5 feet of snow. It was bad. Dimsdale usually had non-stop traffic. It was like a ghost town because no one could leave their driveways. Luckily, the night before, I covered my driveway with snow salt to keep my driveway clear. Snow salt was hard to come by because it usually sells out the moment a shipment comes in at our local grocery store. The amount of salt they sell is not nearly enough for 30k people to each have a bag. So I was lucky to grab one before it sold out. I was happy to have a clear driveway so that once the snow plows clear the roads the next morning, I will have no problem getting out of my driveway to go to work. Oh boy was I wrong. When I woke up the next morning I did my daily routine. Ate breakfast, took a shower, got dressed, and left the house to go to work. When I got outside, I noticed a huge wall of ice plowed onto the entire curb of my driveway, and it stretched all the way to the end of the main road, blocking my neighbor's driveways as well. This road was 1 mile long and this wall of ice was a good 3 to 4 feet tall. I was absolutely fuming knowing that I had to be at work in 30 minutes and could not leave my driveway because of the city's contractor. I got my phone out and began to call the contractor to explain the situation and to see if they can clear the wall of ice. The lady I spoke with literally shrugged it off and said, "Sorry, it's on private property. We can't do anything about it." I reply to her, "So you're telling me that since your snowplows plowed ice from a street onto my driveway, this is now my ice and I have to deal with it?" The lady replies, "Yes." I was furious but had to get to work, so I hung up the call and ended up driving 1 mile through everyone's yard until I was able to find a gap in the ice wall that I could get through. This made me 1 hour late for work. During work, I had a brilliant idea and began to make my plans for revenge. Q Pro Revenge. After work I drove to my uncle's house. He owns his own deer farm and has a big road leading up to his house. He of course needs to be able to plow this road, so of course, he has his own plow he attaches to his truck so that he can clear his yard of snow. I tell him the situation and what my plan for revenge was. His face lights up in pure agreement. We wait until the next morning to put our plan in action. Around 5 a.m., 30 minutes before the plowers opened, he picked me up in his truck with the plow attached and we drove straight to the contractor's office. This is where they park all of their plows and also took phone calls, and it was basically their main office. This was located close to the outskirts of Dimsdale, so there wasn't a lot of traffic. We began to shovel all of the nearby piles of snow we could find onto the entrance of their parking lot. Around 530, we were still working at making the biggest pile of snow we have ever made. On our way back to the office, we notice a car stopped right outside of the entrance to the parking lot. When we pulled up with the newest addition to the pile, a lady gets out of the car and approaches our truck. We roll our window down and ask, "How may we help you?" She asks what the duck we are doing. It dawned on me that this was the same person I spoke with on the phone. I responded, "Just plowing some snow." She screams, "You need to flipping move this snow right now before I call the police." To which I replied, "Sorry, this is on private property, I can't do that." We sped off as she began to pull out her phone. Once we got home, we cleared my driveway and all of our neighbors' driveways. We were all pretty good friends. Some even stopped me to ask if I tried to talk to the contractors. I of course told them what I did. A few hours later, I left the nastiest review on their website and then proceeded to call the city. I explained the whole situation. The man I spoke to let me know that I wasn't the only one to file a complaint. Apparently my neighbors did as well, once they heard about what I was doing. 3 months later, I checked their website to see if anything I did made a difference. It turns out that our city hired a different contractor and the business had to shut down because no one wanted to hire their services due to mine and all of my neighbors' reviews. I guess you could say justice is best served cold. Next one is titled, "How I Cost My Employer Over $50,000 and Got Him Banned in the USA." A bit of backstory: I'm an American who has dual citizenship in both the US and Canada. I work for a Canadian trucking company operating in America. I've been driving a semi for the last 4 years, so I've seen some crap and I know what I'm doing. I also have zero tolerance for BS. I come from a strong military family and I was in the Coast Guard. The story: things started off great with this company. I was paid more than my previous job, and I had more freedom to work when I wanted, and the dispatch guys were really cool. It was a small company, maybe 12 people total. They hired me as an independent contractor even though I was just an employee. Remember this, it's important later. I started seeing red flags early on, but I ignored them because I needed the job. Small stuff like calling me at all hours to take a load, not giving me a load they had promised, stuff like that. Things got worse over the 9 months that I worked for them. They started falsifying my driver logs. Doing this is illegal, so I could have more time to deliver the load and they wouldn't have to pay to reschedule. They stopped answering my calls and texts unless they needed something, and would dispatch me to the wrong address, only telling me the correct address once I was within 15 miles of the first destination, usually around 50 to 100 miles from the correct place. I put up with this BS because, like I said, I needed the money, but they crossed the line when they lost my personal belongings from my truck. Let me explain. I was going in for leg surgery mid-November and wouldn't be able to drive for 3 months. They knew about this months in advance and told me that I could park the truck at the usual spot, a couple miles from my house. They had another driver take my truck with everything inside to the office in Canada without telling me. They then had this driver remove my stuff from the truck and put them in storage. I only found out about this when I went to get some stuff out of the truck and it wasn't there, and I called the office. I drove to the office in Canada, about 70 miles from my house, to get the stuff out of the truck, and it wasn't there. My stuff wasn't doing there. I talked to the guys inside, who then called the driver, and after about 2 hours no one claimed to know where my stuff was. I called and texted at least 4 to 5 times a week for 2 months to see if they had found it yet, and every time they'd brush me off as usual, saying, "Don't worry, it's fine, no problem," before hanging up. I sent them an itemized list of everything that was missing from my truck, over $900 worth of stuff, along with the state law stating that they're responsible for my missing belongings. All I was asking for was to be reimbursed for the cost of my belongings. Another month goes by and I hear nothing. Now I'm fuming. They moved my truck without my knowledge, they illegally removed my things from the truck, they either lost or stole my things, and these bastards don't even have the decency to pretend like they care. I'm done. Screw these guys. Time to enact my revenge. The revenge, I gave them one final chance to make things right, because I'm stupid, I guess, and as I expected they did nothing. So I gathered all of my documentation that I had collected about their wrongdoings over the 9 months that I worked for them, hours of service violations, L&I violations, FMCSA violations, and the IRS violation when they filed their taxes after miscategorizing my employment status. I then sent it all to the appropriate federal agencies. I called the office and told them that I quit and that they brought this upon themselves. I didn't say what I did. But also because of how they treated me and their lack of caring when they lost my things, I also filed a theft report with the police as an added "suck my taint" to the office. They were found guilty of numerous federal violations, theft, and IRS tax fraud. They had to pay fines totaling over $50,000, plus they had to pay me a little over $7,000 in back pay. The owner got arrested for tax fraud, and the entire company was banned from operating in the USA, which was over 90% of their market. The IRS sent me a check for $2,000 for reporting them. Apparently this tax scheme had been going on for a while. All of this could have been avoided if they had just done the right thing from the start. Don't mess with truckers. Next one is titled, "Bitchy Karen Ruins Night of Bowling." Bit of backstory. One day, I was over at my friend's house, then me and him decide to go bowling with his parents. They agree and we decide to go cosmic bowling, regular bowling, but with lights and music, usually from 11 to 2. An hour later a family shows up. We start bowling and then it becomes my turn. I grab the ball, but then I am stopped by a cold voice that says, "Excuse me, that's our ball." I look down and say, "Did you bring this?" And she replies, "No, but that's the one we were given." I then look at the weight, 12-pounder, and say, "Well, there are other 12-pounders just like this one." And she says, "Yeah, but I want this one." So, then I just give in and say, "Okay, here you go." Fast forward, it's my turn again, and I grab a ball with a design way different than the other one. "What do you think you're doing?" I look up and see the mother with the most infuriated look ever and say, "I grabbed a ball." She screams in my face saying, "That's our ball." I take a step back and say, "Lady, this is not your ball, it's the alley's ball." Then, I turn and proceed to make a strike with her ball. She sees this and runs up to the front desk, and when she's done, the guy at the counter just looks at me, smiles and shrugs. Later, it's my turn for the end of the round, then I go and grab the 12-pounder from the first face-off and then I feel a slight tug, then the next thing I know is this lady grabbed the ball and pushed me backwards with the ball and says, "How do you like that?" And I say, "Oh, I'll show you." I then run up to their game board and hit delete all progress, so they lose all of their game progress. Every strike, everything is gone. She practically is throwing a temper tantrum that they wasted $30 and runs up to the counter and demands they kick me out. The guy just bursts out laughing in her face and tells her and her family to get out. Next one is titled, "My Drama Teacher Gets Revenge on Couple Who Harassed Her." This is my drama teacher's story, not mine. She told us this during rehearsal and I thought it fit here. I will refer to my drama teacher as Bess, one of the characters in the play she's directing right now. This happened many years ago as Bess had recently given birth to her 2 children. Her husband, also a drama teacher, was not exactly making the most money with his job. So on top of caring for 2 kids both under the age of 5, she worked 2 jobs. One of those jobs was being a waitress at a local restaurant. One day while she is waiting tables, she gets an awfully rude couple who harasses her and don't leave any tip. They end up reappearing every now and then, being as rude as ever. Bess would always have to be pleasant and nice to them due to company policy. Bess' other job was being a preschool teacher. Around the summer time, new families start signing up for their kids to go to preschool. Bess worked at a more prestigious preschool that had a very good reputation in the community. Due to the exclusivity of the school, they would host multiple days where parents could bring their kids and talk with the staff. Lo and behold, the rude couple shows up with their children. They chat with some other staff, and are very surprised to see that the waitress they belittled worked at the school. After all the parents left, the staff got together and talked about who they wanted to join their school. Bess brought up how the rude parents treated her as a waitress, and how she felt that they would not be a good fit for the community. There was another event hosted the following week. Bess had to hold in her excitement about she would be the ones to tell the rude couple that they couldn't accept their kid into the preschool due to the parents' behavior. And of course, the parents were furious. Bess got her revenge. Next one is titled, Fire a Longtime Employee. He might just rat you out and end up in charge. My dad had worked at the same company for almost 30 years before he was abruptly fired for complete BS. He was coordinating an upcoming meeting of people who had to fly in from around the country. One important participant resigned unexpectedly, so Dad cancelled the meeting via email and explained why. Apparently that counted as improperly communicating privileged information, and he was fired the next day. All this happened a week after Dad's boss retired and was replaced by a new guy who wanted to cut costs. What a coincidence. This was about 10 years ago, near the height of the recession. Dad was in his 50s, hadn't interviewed for a job since the early 1980s. He wasn't sure he'd ever find another job. My mum went back to work at a school to pay the bills while Dad scraped together what he could doing some shitty online consulting gigs for basically minimum wage. They managed to keep their heads above water but only barely. Dad was out of work for a year and a half. He finally landed a job at a new company 3 states away, coincidentally about an hour away from where my wife and I lived and were expecting Dad's first grandchild. Mum and Dad moved to live about 20 minutes away from us. They had paid off the mortgage on their house, so they decided to keep it and rent it out, planning to retire there in a few years. New company treated Dad very well. Better salary than he'd made at old company, good benefits, and respect from his co-workers and superiors. A year later, Mum and Dad were able to buy a second, smaller house near their grandkids. Dad mentioned a few things about his time at old company to his new bosses, nothing confidential or anything, more like overall strengths and weaknesses. Of course, the story of how he got fired came out as well. It turns out that when you work at a company for over 25 years, you learn a thing or two about how it works, and cutting costs by firing experienced employees can make your company vulnerable. New company started to get very interested. They saw an important business opportunity and also a chance to get revenge on behalf of a valued employee. A couple of years later, new company bought old company. They were both big companies, and mergers of this size take time, but when the dust settled it was clear there were redundancies, divisions and products that both companies had that new company only needed one of. They kept as many of old company's people as they could, and very few lost their jobs, except, of course, for the people responsible for firing Dad. New company put Dad in charge of the building he used to work in at old company and let him choose his employees from both old and new companies. Dad had to move back to the old state, so new company helped sell his house in the new state and gave him a moving stipend of several $1,000s. But Mum and Dad were just moving back into their own house. They sold the new house that they'd made payments and improvements on for 5 years for a nice profit. With that money plus the moving stipend, they paid off debts, saved for retirement, and took me, my siblings, our spouses, and the grandkids on a cruise. Last one is titled, Stalk My Best Friend. Hope you like the walk. This is a story my sister told me about when she worked at clothing shop. My memory's not the best as I was told this years ago, but I've got most of the main points across. So my sister got a job at the shop that her best friend Brad, not his real name, worked at when she was 18. Everything was fine for a while until Brad started to seem distant and on edge, and my sister asked him what's wrong. He told her how this girl at McDonald's was flirting with him when he went there for his lunch break and that she was asking him out. He kept declining because he's engaged to his lovely fiancée and has a baby girl with her, and Brad quite straight-laced he doesn't mess around with other girls. But she found him on Facebook and started sending him threatening messages about how she's gonna tell his fiancée that he cheated on her, and let's say indecent photos and videos to put it lightly. My sister, furious about this, messaged this girl to knock it off, otherwise my sister will ruin her life. The girl acts like she has no idea what she's talking about and sends Brad more threatening messages, pictures and videos. So my sister gets Brad to send her all the pictures that McDonald's girl sent him. She then posted them on Facebook and tagged all of her family members in the post. I know this part is true because I remember seeing the post on my wall. You'd think that would be enough, right? Nope. McDonald's girl deleted her Facebook after the shame of showing her whole family what she can do with 2 cucumbers. My eyes still burn to this day. She makes another account that's anonymous, fake name and no profile picture, and started to threaten my sister and started to threaten Brad's daughter. So my sister devised a plan to get Brad to meet McDonald's girl and pick her up in his car, with my sister lay down in the footwell of the back seat with a belt. As soon as McDonald's girl got into the car, my sister wrapped the belt round her neck, pinning her to the headrest, and Brad drove to the moors, a very large hillside that is so huge 2 serial killers used it to hide bodies and some have never been found, and dropped her off with no money, phone or shoes, then drove home. It turns out she was walking for 2 hours in the pitch-black darkness until she found a cottage and called the police. So the next day my sister and Brad were taken in by police for questioning over what happened. Both denied everything. And I know what you're asking. Couldn't they know it was Brad's car from motorway cameras and stuff like that? Well, turns out my sister asked a family friend of ours, who owned a garage, if they could get some number plates that matched Brad_S black Vauxhall Astra, and being that they're quite common he had 3 in the garage at the time, and gave her the plates from one of the vehicles. So when they saw a black Vauxhall Astra in the footage, they looked for Brad's number plate and found some random John Doe's car instead. And for McDonald's girl, she had a mental breakdown after my sister would come into McDonald's for her lunch break when McDonald's girl would be on shift and would just stare at her while she ate her food, and would drive past her and slow down to near enough a crawl when McDonald's girl would walk home from work. The funny thing is, my sister likes to bring this story up if I bring a new girlfriend round to have dinner with my family, so they know not to mess with her brother. Thanks for listening.